Officially, on my birth certificate, it's Kenneth Lee Hale, but everybody calls me Kenny Hale. Young men around the neighborhood call me Coach because for 35 years I coached youth football at Western Generals and had some good seasons, had some bad seasons, but mostly good. 11 championship teams with undefeated throughout the year. Basically had 6 losing seasons out of 35. That where we didn't go over 500. And I said, yeah, considering the percentage, that's pretty good. Also coached girls basketball at Roosevelt, and then we ended up with the boys team when the girls were a better team, and Cookie and Ed took it away from us and took Lisa Lee and all. But anyway, and then we came into Stonewall, Dennis Harris and I, and coached the girls basketball for, I don't know, it seems like it was like 12 years. And I said, wait a minute, it's been that long I've been coaching basketball? But it didn't take away from my love for football, coaching young men. We lived on South Hills, Walnut Road, but I was 2 years old, so the only memory I have of it is my brother's telling me that I got ran over by a car going to the playground. I was too young, too small. Like I said, the car didn't even see me. Kept on going. And moved here to the West Side Hill. And when I was 2 years old, this was in 1957, went to J.E. Robbins School on Beach Avenue. That's no longer a school. Went to Woodrow Wilson, which is no longer a school, and torn down. And the high school was now West Side Middle School. So, the high school, Stonewall Jackson, does not exist in name, just in memory. But growing up on the West Side, the Hill Boys, as we were called, tended to travel a little more than everybody else because it was easy walking downhill. So we would walk down, sometimes play basketball at Tiscowa, sometimes at Second Avenue Center. Sometimes we would even walk all the way uptown and play against, in Washington Manor. But we always did it as a group, so somebody get in trouble or nobody get in a fight that, somebody couldn't pull them out of. And, but we weren't rowdy, we were just kids and, sometimes cantankerous. And then when I was about 11 years old, I started going to Salvation Army to get all those, games out of me, and ended up being, the boy of the month, from the Salvation Army. Got that little trophy. Went to the YMCA because we used to get free tuition, free, get sponsors. They would, pay you a membership to the Y's Youth. So there was always those things to do. And the fun part was always every winter we would, throw snowballs at the Beach Avenue bus, little red bus before they became KRT. And one of my friends, a more dangerous and bold person, Hubert Jackson, we called him Bozo because he was crazy, rode the sled off the hill, and when the Beach Avenue bus came by, he couldn't stop and slid all the way under the bus. That's how how they buses were then. But he and when the bus went by, we didn't hear no crash, we didn't hear no bump, and we looked, and he got his hands over his head when the bus goes by. So we were like, Bozo, you crazy, But he was a talented young man because Bozo could. A Cadillac back in the day, he could actually standing broad jump, leap over one. And I actually personally saw him chase a rabbit down in the woods and catch it. I mean, he was one of those just talented athletes, and he was 5'6" and could actually high jump 6'3", 6'4" on the bar in his best leaps. So, and then my best friend just passed away, Curtis Harrison, and here's when you got a good friend. Because all of our young life, we fought. We could be playing marbles, we'd fight. We could be playing basketball, we'd fight. We could be playing wiffle ball, we'd fight. If we were not on the same team, it was going to be a fight before the game was over. So, and as a kid, you don't think about it, but you're like, I ain't crying. He ain't never gonna make me cry. Well, when he went before I did, that made me cry. He got the victory. And I know he's in a better place. But you still miss old friends. As you always say, you can't have a new old friend. And a childhood friend like that, you remember things. And that's what I would always remember about the West Side. The West Side Hill Boys, wherever we went, you knew there was 2 or 3 of us, in the flow. We were seldom, ran by ourselves. But not in a pack that was threatening to anyone. Usually just 3 or 4 of us. Because as a young man growing up and going to school, my brother Billy and his friends were 2 and 3 years older than us, made us walk a block behind them. We couldn't walk in the same space as them, so we kind of trailed them to school. And then we did. We were trailing them in school, but trailing their footsteps, in the life we chose and the patterns and again the places and people we met grew because of that. First you know your community, then you know people in your school. Well, then you know people like say the West Side Hill, the West Side itself, And then guess what? If your parents didn't know, your friends' parents, you probably were not allowed to go over there and play or spend the night and that kind of thing. So growing up and playing youth football, expanding my territory to, Orchard Manor, which is now called the Woo, and Little Page and those areas in North Charleston. And my favorite memory of North Charleston was the old white building out on 7th Avenue. My brother and I, Billy, it was Thursday night family fun night. So we stayed, and had fun all day. When we got home, it was dark. Well, guess what? That meant the street lights were already on, and we weren't in the house. So my father, he started spanking my brother. And Billy wasn't going to cry at first. Then he said, this man may go off on me. So he broke out the big tear. So I got my tear on before he got to me, thinking I'm going to get out of this. I think 30 minutes later, he finally finished up because I tried to run around and get him dizzy and tired and everything. Every little trick I knew as a kid that just didn't work. And but 5 older brothers, and being the youngest of those 5, there were role models, but you know how you never want to be exactly like somebody, even though they're your brothers, and you always, well, which Hale are you? And one of my brother's classmates used to call me Inhale and call my brother Billy Exhale. So it was, it was how he would distinguish us, hey, you're Inhale, aren't you? Yeah, where's Exhale? He was coming, because I would always try to race them up the hill to get the mail and, be on time, getting home from school, get the homework out the way so you could go out and play. Family went, every which way. But one thing that was significant also about growing up, my father, who I came to discovered after I joined the military, was a Tuskegee Airman. And it was when I was getting commissioned through the Academy of Military Science in they call it Merville, but it looks like Maryville, Tennessee. I was doing a paper on one particular individual, and heard this reference about Tuskegee Airmen. Well, I looked and I said, I've seen these photos before. They were in my father's photo book and his photo album from his military days. So I did a little more research and come to find, and I'm thinking Tuskegee Airmen just who flew the planes. Well, it's the mechanics, the cooks, it was everybody that was on the base was considered a Tuskegee Airman. So I became real interested in that because 4 of my brothers, there were 6 of us, and like 5 of us served in the military. So it was like we had a military traditional type family. I was fortunate enough to become the only commissioned officer out of the group because I understood where the money was at, like I said. And I was unemployed when I, joined the Guard. It was basically my only job was at 1 weekend a month. But like I said, you could volunteer and pull extra days anytime you wanted. So, and after doing that, I was like, I made more money doing this than I did for a whole year working for the state of West Virginia. I was like, time to move my cheese. I started at Marshall, became the professional student. I told people not only did I have a senior year, I had a freshman senior year, sophomore senior year, a junior senior year before I had a senior year, and realized I'm spending too much money and ended up graduating from state in 1984. And I came out of high school in 73. So you can see it was but I persevered, I endured, and I got in accounting, yeah. And when the Regency is considered just a Regency business, a program, not specifically accounting, but they understood that where my strengths were, and then at first, it was like all this time I tried to stay away from state because in high school we would go down there. Their May days and their weekend parties and stuff. From the West Side, yeah, we always rolled down West Virginia State because there were some pretty girls in Institute, West Virginia, and also in Pinewood, a little section of folk, and then of course in what they call the Bottom or Lower Dunbar. So, it was a way to see different females that you hadn't grown up with, that you might say, oh, okay, a new area to lay a trap, So, didn't want to go to state. It was just too close to home, And I wanted to get away from home, so I ended up down Marshall. Did have an opportunity. Just knew I wasn't going to have the finances because I was recruited by Fisk University. And I said I'd never made it out of Fisk. It just would have taken me in a different direction, and I would have seen sites that, I would have never been in school. I'd have traveled too much. I'd have been up and down the road, from there. But after coming back home, working for the state for like 5.5 years, finally getting employed with the National Guard in '89 as a logistics plans officer. And I ended up getting into the equal opportunity career field, labor relations specialist. So, negotiating, mediating, collaborating, kind of led me to the work I did in the community and working with community service projects, joining my fraternity while in college of Omega Psi Phi, made me service-oriented, becoming a Prince Hall Mason, still service-oriented, and it's about putting the community first. Well, now I got my own community. I got 7 kids, 18 grandkids, and 3 great-grandkids, so I'm still serving. I'm still working for others, but it's a pleasure to do that also. Sometimes it's not only people-based, but a place-based type programs. And even though NAACP State Conference is statewide, there was always this disconnect from how, Charleston was a lead branch, has always been a lead branch in its activity and activism for the community. And when I went and became, I started out as secretary for the state conference. Mr. James Tolbert and George Rutherford, who were Masons, convinced me to hey, this is a good place for you to start. We're trying to get you ready to preside. But I went in with the 2 goals: education and economic development were my state presidential platform campaign. The reason for serving, because there's a plethora of committees, as you well know, that you could join in on the NAACP, whether it's at the branch or at the state level. But I wanted to focus on those 2, and as we put a plan together, a strategic plan to engage in it, it was your story of pulling the wagon and folks dragging their feet. We never could get the branches to vote the plan in so we could activate it as it should have been. So even though that was disappointing, I knew it was going to be worthy, a worthy venture for us to delve into this type of work, because it was going to serve those who would come after us, and that's the children and their education, and the fact that there would be jobs for them to enter into, or they could create their own skills to create new jobs for the new job market. So I started out with that. Then Carlson Davis got elected the state conference president, so it was like a sort of a swap. He handed his presidential seat to me, and then 2 years later I got re-elected to the position, so I served 4 years as the branch president. And at that time there was I guess another change on the west side, because the Tuesday morning group, and even though it started out with just the pastors, it became just leaders of other social activities, for what I call groups that were concerned about the community, even though they had different mission statements. The Tuesday morning group decided to bring all this leadership together to sort of change systems. So I started becoming active in the Tuesday morning group, and it sort of filled the void what in NAACP didn't go. And it was more active, more hands-on, not just sit back and wait and watch. And monitor situations, which NAACP tends to do a lot, monitor more than act, and not advocate as much as I had hoped they would. So getting involved in the community, I knew I was already coaching both sports. I was even coaching like travel basketball, but then the wife said, you need to take time for us. So, 6 months out of the year, basketball and football took up, half a life or half a year. And then I'll say the other time, I got out of travel basketball, was, trying to do things in the summer with my wife, go on vacation, just, get up and go, get away, because I know she gets tired of just sitting around the house. Even though she's still working and I'm retired, she still wants to get out the house and go somewhere when she does take off. So I'm more prepared to do that now, anytime she wants to. And matter of fact, this winter we might go somewhere again for our honeymoon on the end of this month, just so we can say we got away for a minute before the year was out. It might be somewhere warmer than it, in particular. Last time we went to D.C., which was fine because I have a lot of friends and that went to Marshall who were in the D.C. area, so it was nice seeing them. But other than the service of community, it's also, as that saying, some people don't grow and move more than 50 miles from their own hometown. Well, I didn't even go 5 miles from home, because like I said, I went from the hill to the flats, and I think it was, like, what's in it for me. One of the things I wanted to do, because even though I was going to work, I was wearing my uniform, and I thought maybe young men, or people in the community will see me every day, struggling, but putting on a uniform, going to work, coming back home, and being a part of this community. It may change some images and make people want to, become soldiers, airmen, whatever, but also just, being in a position to serve and build the community, because, I'm still in that same home 27 years later. And that was probably about the same time, close to, that I started coming to church here, because my wife and I, she went to CCT, Central Community Tabernacle. I was going to Simpson United. She didn't like the slow pace of a United Methodist Church. I didn't like the spirited fashion of the her church. I didn't feel like coming home from church and being tired from being hollered and shouting and feeling the Holy Spirit, as they say. So the perfect blend for us was Grace Bible, spirited, but a message of truth, and and you can actually hear what the preacher's saying, not being shouted at. And so it was a different style that we became comfortable with, and that was around when my youngest son Kelvin was born. And like I said with Simpson, when I took my girls to Simpson, I didn't know if I'd get my daughters back. They'd get passed around the church so much. I got them back, and now they're grown and back out the house again. So that's been a journey of the Hale family growing up here on the west side. When I went to Simpson, they used to say the friendliest church in town. Well, when I came to Grace, I already had friends here, and just became more family. And the term grace is more than just a title on a church building. It's actually what we all ask and pray God for. Grace in our life, grace for our marriages, grace for our children, protection for their well-being. You're basically just seeking God's grace, and His mercy and His grace, have been abundant, and I feel is because of my affiliation with the church and the people that I know from the church. I don't feel like I'm offensive when I do the Kenny Hale thing that I sometimes do, and go, but I have moderated my lifestyle to be acceptable, but not change, still be 100, because I'm not going to dilute what God made me. That's the best thing about me. But God has given me more, and so it feels like I'm able to give more back to the community as well as in serving my family and community.